Okay, so welcome back to Voices in Health and Wellness. This is the show where we sit down with forward-thinking leaders across clinical care, behavioural health and wellness to talk about how the industry is evolving, especially as younger generations like millennials and Gen Z reshape expectations around health, access and engagement. Today's guest is someone whose work really stands out in this space. I'm thrilled to welcome Samantha Cliborne, a board-certified behaviour analyst and founder of Behaviour Matters Consulting, based in South Carolina. Samantha brings over a decade of experience in behavioural health with a deep focus on creating family-centred models of care that don't just target individual behavioural change, but transform the entire ecosystem around the client. So, Samantha, thank you so much for your time this afternoon coming on the show. Are you actually calling from South Carolina as we speak?
Yes, I am. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. Maybe we could start at the top and perhaps talk a little about your role and how it fits into the bigger picture of what you do at Behaviour Matters.
Absolutely. So my role as owner, clinical director, and behavior analyst is really multifaceted, but my training as a behavior analyst is really what has given me the tools to break down why people do what they do. I've applied that same lens to really the care model itself. I ask questions like, why do we approach therapy the way we do? What behaviors are actually being really reinforced, and what outcomes actually matter to the families? Behavior matters. Like our mission is to create meaningful and lasting behavior change. In order to do that, this is where millennials are different, right? We don't just focus on the child. We have to educate and empower the entire family system. You can't treat behavior without treating the system around it, and as I know, and as people are slowly learning as technology and social media is taking over, is human behavior is shaped by consequences. Right now, clinicians are competing with social media, short form content, 24/7 access to healthcare and health information. So really the approach matters when it comes to really just wellness and behavior change in general. If a family doesn't feel heard, understood, or aligned with the provider's values, like they're going to disengage, right? So, or worse, like they're going to mistrust the entire process. And, I feel like ABA, applied behavior analysis, like 10, 15 years ago, like outside of that millennial generation, it was very rigid. It was very like, you listen to me, this is what I said. It was very compliance based. And I am flipping the switch, because so many families are ready for that. They don't want to be told what to do. They want to partner, and that's really what we do at Behavior Matters is we're that partner with these families. And, we take it from them. What do you want to see? And then we do the absolute best we can with staying within our ethical guidelines and giving that to them. If they say, you know what, I don't like that, we don't stop. We lean in. We say, okay, how can we change that? So to me, that's really how we're doing things differently nowadays as millennials.
Got it. So what was the original spark for starting Behaviour Matters? Was there a gap in the care models that you were seeing at the time, or was there something else?
You know what? It's kind of cool that, we're talking in different countries right now. So this all started, Behavior Matters all started for me when I was living in South Korea. I loved experiencing different cultures, different family systems. And I went to South Korea. I taught English for a little bit over there. And what I saw with the special needs community really changed me. I was in a classroom with a kid just sitting there banging his head up against the wall. And I have mind you, I'm an Army veteran, right? I've never seen these things before. I have no idea what I'm experiencing right now. And I'm like, that's when I started the research, so it wasn't necessarily like, where am I seeing, the breakdowns in, wait times and care and intakes and stuff. It was more the family unit for me. It was over there in South Korea, I was told that if these kids display behaviors like that, they get sent away and they never get seen again. And that really resonated with me. So what I did when I came back, I was like, okay, we're changing this game. We're not allowing this to happen anymore. Even though this was in another country, like, I feel like parents still today, they do somewhat the same thing, if we look at learned helplessness and things like that. So really behavior matters started in another country. It started with a different dream, and it molded into this amazing, honestly, these four walls that I have it's four walls of trust, and it's four walls of trust within our family, families that come in. It's within my staff as well. My staff, they also get training on trauma informed care. We have a lot of kids that are, the world is the world at this current moment, and kids are going through trauma. And we're finally, as millennials, at a stage where we can open up and we can ask those questions of like, what's wrong? Let's help you through this. Let's get through emotional intelligence. We're finally there. And Behavior Matters is just really taken a hold onto that model. And I mean, we're running with it. In 2026, we're going to be adding like occupational therapy as well. So currently we have ABA and speech therapy, but occupational therapy next year, along with mental health counseling. We're going to regulate the body. We're going to work on the mind, and we're really going to treat the family system as a system, as what it is.
Amazing. So what does a typical day look like for you at the moment? I mean, I think you mentioned you're wearing lots of hats in what you do. Maybe there isn't such a thing as a typical day, but give me some sense of things.
What I love about my job is, you're right, there is no typical day. I come in as early as possible. I'm an early bird, and I sit and I set my schedule for the day. I look at my schedule. I have an amazing team that really works well together to really set up the best possible things for my day. So my day is going to end up being training RBTs, registered behavior technicians, in programs and how to develop certain skills out of the kids that we see. My day is going to include conversing with parents. I do a lot of parent education. Like a lot of parent education. Because if you think about it, as clinicians, we're only with these kids for a short amount of time. The parents are the ones that are with them the most. And so I do a ton of training. So while my RBTs are there and they're working with the kids, I'm working with the parents. And we're really attacking the system from both ends. So after parent education, if I remember to eat, that will happen. If not, I also do in home. So I will go into the home and work through that as well. So, I balance payroll, I balance schedules, I balance everything. But it ends up being no set schedule, but a beautiful dance all day long. And just an amazing environment that I love to be in. And I've been very thankful that my staff has also said the same. They feel heard here. I ask my staff constantly, what can I do to help you understand better? How do you learn? I focus on the staff way more than I focus on the kids in a certain degree, right? Because I can tell you about a kid very easily of like, hey, these are the goals we're working on. This is the end goal, right? This is where we're at. This is the end goal. And if I know my clinician well, I'm going to be able to say, hey, this is how you learn. I'm going to give it to them just like that. And it's going to cut my time down tremendously. So that's another kind of tactic that I use as well. Like if we get to know a person, we know how they learn, we know how they act. And as a behavior analyst, the big question I ask every day is why people do what they do, So I really focus in and I lean in on that. And I really try to make the best out of my day and help as many people as possible.
That sounds like a very, very crammed day. On the matter of your team, you mentioned your staff. So how has your team evolved since you launched? Have there been any unexpected shifts or lessons along the way for them?
There has been, because it is when we get into the nitty gritty, once kids start unmasking, right, they really start showing their true colors. And, a lot of my technicians, they haven't seen trauma before. They don't know what it looks like. They don't know how to navigate questions around that to get to, the belief system that these kids have and why they're continuing to do what they do. So my staff has learned tremendous. They've learned so much. And I literally, my staff will tell me, I've had one therapist tell me, like, I have learned more with you in the first week than I have learned in my entire life. Because I sit down with them and I talk to them about, like, everyone gets the same spiel from me when they first get hired. This is what we do, this is how we do it. It's an extensive training process. You're going to get bad days, but how do you get through those bad days? I have something called a dopamine menu. And my RBTs, and honestly, my speech therapist, my front desk, my billing manager, they all, have the same tools at them in front of them as well. They have a dopamine menu. I've got 20 minutes. What's going to give me the most dopamine that I can get right now so that I can go back to my job and perform and honestly still be happy, because that's what dopamine does, So it's really about the approach to things. And it's about, we're never done learning. So there are still things that I have to learn. And as soon as I learn them, they learn them. So they are always evolving and always changing.
Amazing. Before we set this up, we had a brief email exchange, and I think you mentioned in one of your replies that your holistic family model really aligns with how millennial families approach wellness. What kinds of shifts are you seeing in how families engage with care today?
So the major shift, as far as, families and that are seeing is, they're really seeing that, they want that quick, immediate fix. And we have to navigate them through that. This isn't really a quick, easy fix. They're used to technology where everything's at their fingertips. Well, why can't this go faster? And a major shift that we've made in my clinic is how we define and support the regulation, not just from the parents, but with the kids. If a child's dysregulated, no amount of prompting is really going to produce the meaningful engagement. And millennial parents know this. They want us to support the whole child, not just manage that behavior. So integrating those holistic strategies into the sessions, like, for example, like I told you, we teach staff how to recognize, like, the child's nervous system. They're stuck in fight or flight, those moments. It's co-regulation. We might use breath work. We might use rhythmic tapping. What we really utilize is frequency-based sound, and we help shift the child into a more regulated state where learning is possible. The big buzzword, everyone's mindfulness. It's not a buzzword to me, it's a behavior. We model it, we shape it, we reinforce it. For some kids, that might mean structured breathing routines. Kids that have ASD, autism spectrum disorder, their cerebellums, their wires are so mixed up, right? So that's where these repetition comes in. This is where we are going to have that structured practice of those breathing works. It might be walking outside. We're going to take your shoes off. We're going to connect with the body. These aren't breaks from therapy. This is therapy. Because all of these things, they build the foundation for the sustained engagement. And as we know, learning is not going to happen if we cannot sustain engagement. So we found that, when we meet kids where they are, neurologically, like what they can handle, things like that, we reduce the number of behaviors maintained by escape and by avoidance. There's only 4 reasons really why we do what we do. Once we figure out what that is, we just shape our consequences. So we are going to use the holistic viewpoint. We're not going to, promote medication. We're going to promote, whether it be natural substances, herbs, things like that, magnesium. My goodness, we're all deficient in magnesium. So that's the first thing I'm going to tell you to do. What'd you do? You take magnesium, right? All these parents are like, I want melatonin to get my kids to sleep. Why don't we? Absolutely. Go for it. do the melatonin. Make sure it's in the dark though, because that's how our brain operates with melatonin, right? But, try a bedtime routine before, try to set up the behavior of sleep beforehand. So that's just kind of how we look at things differently, and we kind of set the expectation up a little bit differently for our parents.
Thank you. Do you see the shift towards family-centered care as part of a broader trend, or is it something that you've been personally championing independently?
Honestly, I personally feel like, at least in my area, I feel like it's not very common. I see a lot of wait times. I see a lot of boring waiting rooms. I see a lot of just no callbacks. Any person that puts in on our website, hey, I'm interested in this, they're going to get a call. They're going to get a follow-up. They're going to get something, and, I do feel like, it needs to shift, because the world is shifting, as generations get older, our new generations come out. Like, what are we going to do with the generation beta, and the generation alpha? Like, what is care going to look like then? It might all be remote, I don't know, but I know what we do know is we have to shift with the generations, or we're not going to be able to tap in to help them.
Got it. Have the millennials and the Gen Z parents pushed you to change anything that you didn't expect to revisit? I know you talked about them wanting the kind of quick fix, but is there anything that you've kind of caved into doing on the basis of their expectations?
I would say no, because I set the expectations for them. I'm a very much like, we're going to be in this together. I want you to tell me what you don't like. I want you to tell me what you do like. I want to tell me what you don't feel comfortable with doing, because I'm going to find a way around it. I'm literally going to set these parents up for, this is what it's going to look like, right? This is when training is going to start with the whole family. This is when the training is going to start with the kid. I set them up of, this is how we communicate. I try to answer as many questions up front, so that way parents are in the middle of the night wondering or waking up, oh, do I need to do that? Oh, wait, do I have this that day? No, they get, I'm a big visual support aid person. They're going to get a list of everything that they need to do. Maybe too much. I've had a lot of parents like, okay, I got it. We've got the handout. But I like to really just have them be informed, and there's no questions, right? There's no like, well, what ifs? You know what it is. And if you don't know what it is, you are more than welcome to reach out, and we're going to answer that question for you. But they're not going to be up in the middle of the night thinking and wondering, like, what if? They're going to know. So that's really how I kind of set things up a little differently. That's why I feel like, I am very different than most ABA clinicians, because of the way that I see the world. I have applied the same things of my training as a behavior analyst to the care model. That's why we approach things the way that we do.
Amazing. So what's working well for your team right now? And I obviously, apart from your leadership and the attention that you give your staff, is there anything else that kind of makes this whole thing a great success for you?
Training is huge. Getting together with them in my office and in our clinic, in our front office, there is a kitchen table. Andrew, there is a kitchen table in there, and we will sit down at the kitchen table and we will talk. And I will get to know about them. I will get to know about their stressors, and it brings the environment, So that's really kind of the big kicker there,
Nice. And on the other end, has there been any particular sticking points, frustrations, or challenges that you have in trying to do what you do?
Oh, there are always sticky situations. There are always challenges. Not every parent is going to be as willing to open up. If you think about the kids that we serve, and the diagnoses and the disorders that they have, those came from somewhere. And a lot of times our parents are struggling with the same things as the kids are. So it's about really monitoring the parents' care as well. And I've had some parents that are really, they can't do it. They can't stick to the structure. They can't follow the methodology, so to say, and so that right there it gets sticky, because it's like, I can help you. I know that I can help you. But at a certain point, like, I can't do more than you. You're going to have to, if we're going to be a team, I show up to the line, and you've got to show up to the line. I can cross over a little bit and I can help you, and I will, and I have. But at a certain point, we're at that point where it is time to, go different ways. And maybe there's another clinician out there that is that flows and meshes better with them. So, that's really the only sticky situation that I feel like I have encountered, is being able to, because you got to think, like, I'm in the care of these kids. I've had some kids for 4 or 5 years. And so if you can't stick that long with really meaningful behavior change, then there is someone out there that's going to help you a little bit differently than I am.
Thank you. As a business owner, are there any particular outcomes or metrics that you particularly focus on in your business?
Absolutely. We are absolutely focusing on efficiency here. So it's about how well that we set up our clinicians to do their data taking, take their notes, that kind of stuff. So it's really efficiency as best as we can in any form that we can. Efficiency is key.
Got it. Any particular client feedback that you pay most attention to get the kind of the signals that what you do is working for people?
Yeah, signals. So a lot of times our signals are going to be within our body. They're not going to be within our words. I work with a population that, that are learning to use their words. And so, yeah, it's about reading the body language, because they're not always going to tell you what, if they're going to do something or not. I will look at the way the eye contact that I get from parents. Honestly, I look at their feet. I look at where their hips are positioned. I look at things very differently. I want to see, if you're tired today, because then I'm going to slow down the way that I talk. You know what I mean? So I really look at the body language. What is the body telling me? And how I can react to that, and really get them to boost the mood. How can I give them the dopamine that I know that they need? So yeah, so I'm going to read their body language. I'm going to kind of see what I can do to help them in that area, and then that's how I'm going to make my judgments of where we're going to move next.
Thank you. Are there any parts of your operation that you wish could run smoother? It sounds like you've got a very tight ship. You've got a very good engaged team. But is there anything that you think, there's some bottlenecks here, things I'd like to smooth out?
Yeah, there's always improvements that can be made. The biggest thing right now is, we're going to need a bigger space. With adding in occupational therapy and mental health counseling, we're going to definitely need a bigger space. So smoothing out the ins and outs of who's in treatment space 1, who's in treatment space 2, just the logistics of the work, so to say, can easily be smoothed out. There's always ways to smooth out scheduling, things like that. But other than that, I try to keep this as well oiled as possible. And the oil is the happiness, right? So.
Brilliant. And how do you balance personalization with scalability in your programs? Because there's only one of you, and you're talking about growing. I just wonder how you manage to kind of strike that balance.
So the way that I do it is I give everything, all of me, all day long. I am this job. It is not the only thing that I care about by any means. But, when I wake up in the morning and it's time to go to work, like, they're going to get Samantha Cliborne, basic Samantha Cliborne, but they're also going to get Samantha Cliborne BCBA. They're going to get this, they're going to get that, and it's, yeah, it's hard sometimes, but you just show up, you be happy, you exude, you put out into the world what you want, your staff to exude. And that's really what I try to do. And it's what I've been fairly successful at so far. So I show up every day and I try to do the absolute best I can. And you know what? That's all we all are doing. We are all just doing the absolute best we can. So it's about being aware. It's about not just being aware of yourself, but it's about being aware of everyone else around you too. So keeping that mindfulness as well.
Amazing. And sort of 6 to 12 months down the line, what would success look like for you at your work at Behaviour Matters? Where do you want to be a little bit further down the line? Obviously, you talked about taking on more people, hopefully finding your larger space, but is there anything else?
Yes, it is going to be integrating other healthcare providers and systems into our treatment. So where we're looking at going, like as far as moving to a different location, we're going to look to go around dentist's office, doctor's office. So much of our kids are scared of these places, and if we can bridge that fear between other clinicians and them doing their job and treating these kids that, have genuine fears of the tools, the basic tools that a dentist uses every day. If I can get them just through habituation, if I can just get them to see those tools, to walk in those doors, to sit in their waiting rooms, then we're really gonna change the face of healthcare, because you're not gonna have screaming kids. I've gone into daycares, I've gone into doctor's offices, I've gone into homes, and I've taught the clinicians what to look for, how to go a little slower. So honestly, down the road, 6 months, a year down the road, it's going to be partnering with other clinicians, and it's going to be, how can we as a field change our environment, our society. That's where I want Behavior Matters to go.
Amazing. And if you could wave a magic wand and solve one big operational or care challenge, what would that be?
One operation of what?
A big operational or care challenge. What would that be?
An operation all care challenge.
Operational or care challenge. So something about the operations of your business or about the whole care business that you're in. What would it be?
One more time. Sorry.
So if you could wave a magic wand and solve one big bottleneck, whether it's an operational thing about the way that the business runs or about the whole care sector itself.
Okay. What would that be? It would be cohesion, to be completely honest. It would be, yes, we do have to follow HIPAA and we have to make sure we're maintaining client dignity and records and all of that, but it would be cohesion. It would be getting together and understanding, not just knowing, a little pamphlet of like what OT does, right? And how they help regulate, sensory overloads and sensory issues. It's about, well, I want to know how to do that too. I don't want to just know about it. I want to know it. So it would be the cohesion between all the different therapy models. There's so much in mental health counseling that I take on. My master's was in counseling, and I use those tools every single day. And what's crazy is they call it one thing in mental health counseling and behavior analysis, they call it another, and it's the exact same thing, right? And so I feel like that a lot of clinicians are kind of, this is my realm and this is my modality, and I'm stuck here. No, we're not stuck. Be unstuck. Be flexible. Be curious, and I think that's what's taken me so far is I'm curious. I want to know what they're doing in PT. I have watched PT sessions and I've said, oh, I can do that. And so obviously I don't do the technical things because that is their education and their knowledge, but I'll take some of their exercises and I'm like, I can do that. Let's add that in. And so not only are we looking at shaping behavior, but we're working on the correct muscles in order to get up to do potty training, right? It's about where you hold your hands. It's about building the correct muscles. There's so much that we can utilize from other therapy modalities. So to answer that question, cohesion.
Thank you. And final question, if time and budget weren't an issue, what's a service or innovation you'd love to implement tomorrow?
A service implementation I would want to implement tomorrow. That is a very good question. And that's a tough one. I don't actually know what can we do? What would you do?
Well, I guess you may be very happy with everything you're doing. You may be doing everything that you think is possible. I just thought I'd put it out there. If there's one thing that there was, it was a money thing that you couldn't do tomorrow, or something else that would take a little bit of thinking. Is there something that you would like go for straight away? But it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's I love the path that we're on. I think that we're on that path, and we are honestly, like, we're doing everything that we're doing that we need to be doing, and we're going in the right path. And as long as we stick with the cohesion, as long as we stick with the level of partnership between our clients and our staff, then there's nothing else that needs to happen. Just cohesion, familyness, togetherness, but also some hard work and some dedication. It takes discipline.
Samantha, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. It's been really interesting hearing about what you do in Behaviour Matters, the passion and drive that you have, and your approach for caring for your team and making sure that you give your patients really the best possible outcomes, really. Really grateful. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.